All right, Seth, we're really going to focus on how the topography on your property and the neighboring lands affects how the deer use your property, so we have a better idea how to approach the whole situation. So if we go to a LiDAR-based mapping application, we can really see the topography on your property. It's very, very diverse, and it's got some really neat features. And topography is always kind of a catch-22. You have bigger deer in the area because it is more difficult to hunt, and they use the topography to their advantage. But if we understand how the deer like to use the topography to their advantage, we're able to work around it to a certain extent and hunt it a little smarter than the neighbors, so we have a better crack at not disturbing those deer and a better crack at tagging those deer. So when we talk about topography, the first thing we always focus on is how topography affects where deer prefer to bed. So let's look at this line right here. Let's say this line represents a northwest wind. If I pull up the profile of this line and I start up here with this red dot, okay, and I'm going to move down here, come down to the bottom of the screen and watch. So we're going with a northwest wind. The deer want to bed on the leeward side of the hill. So they're climbing the hill, climbing the hill, climbing the hill. We get to the peak up here at 1467. We get right over here, still at 1467, 1466. If I had a flat spot right here on this hill at 1464 or a little lower, what it's doing for me is as the wind comes over the deer's back, it swirls. Crests the top of this hill and it swirls just like it does in a river. And it gives the deer a much wider representation of the scent that's back here. So the wind's coming this way. Everything back here can't see the deer because they dropped over the top of the hill. The wind is swirling. They can smell and hear everything back there. If danger approaches back there, they simply drop down this canyon down here into the bottom. Conversely, when they're sitting up here at 1,464 feet on a flat spot with back and side cover, what they can't smell, they can see down here in the bottom. They can see everything in the bottom. So if danger comes up toward the bottom, aka think about us hunting with the wind in our face. We're like, okay, northwest wind, I'm going to head up to that bedding area. So here you come. We're climbing the hill, heading towards the bedding area. Before we even get to here, right, these deer up here have seen us, and they've drifted over the top and back off the other side of the mountain. We never see them. So a lot of times guys don't even know that deer are using these bedding areas on these properties, because if they approach with the wind at their back like this, the deer are gone down to the bottom before they even see them. And if they approach from the bottom, these deer are 2 bounds from the top. They slip over the top and they're gone. So when you look for these places, look at this flat spot right here. I don't know if that's a bench or if it's just something on this line tool, but this flat spot would, if it was a bench, this would be some place that deer would love to bed. They'd like to have it up a little higher. They'll take it down here. Give me that flat spot on the leeward side with some back cover and some side cover and an open view undisturbed to the bottom, and the deer are going to use that to bed. You will consistently find spots on your properties for different winds that work like this. Now let's say the wind is out of the southeast here, opposite wind. It's starting down here in your east corner, and it's blowing up here towards the northwest. The deer are going to do the opposite. They have to drop to the leeward side on this side of the hill. And where they're going to go here, I guarantee you, right there on that spot right there. It's a flat spot. They're going to get them swirling winds behind us. We're at 1,459 feet, or 1,460 right here. Down at the bottom is 1,444. So they got a 16-foot drop from here to here. So they can see that danger there and walk away from it. And they can smell the danger back here and go down the hill and get away with it. That's going to repeat itself over and over on this property. So you need to become a student of that. Understand how that's going to affect your access, where you're going to improve bedding, where you're going to put your food plots. It's everything, because everything being equal, topography always trumps where the deer want to bed. So with that thermal bedding selection, again, you have to be a student of it all over the property. Let's go on to another thermal affected thing that really gets us. Now, a lot of times, you can look at where your logging roads here. Usually those are up top. Usually that's where guys end up putting their food plots. Now when I put my food plot, let's just zoom in and say I've got a food plot on this ridge right here. Okay, I put a food plot. I open all this up when I put a food plot here. Another thing we need to understand about the thermals, if you look right here, I'm at 1,461 feet. Okay, 1,467 feet, 1,445 feet, right? This land is going downhill on your property, and your whole property is like that basically. It's all higher in the west, and it goes down in the east. Now what's going to happen is in the evening, when the sun hits the skyline and the ground is not warmed by the sun anymore, the ground is cooler than the air, and that air that's by the ground starts to sink. Your thermals roll downhill. What that means is when we design our food plots, we have to be careful. We have to look at what we got for thermal sinks that are going to beat us. Because if we're sitting up here in a tree, the sun hits the horizon, those thermals start to sink. I guarantee those bucks know where to set up, and the mature deer know where to set up along this edge here, possibly in this little ditch right here. They know where to set up in that ditch. There's those older, smarter deer take advantage of those thermals in the evening, and they set up in those thermal sinks. That's why they don't come out till right before dark, because they are off the field waiting to smell what's in that field before they approach. There are ways to plan and get around that, but you have to be cognizant that those thermal sinks are gonna dictate where a lot of these deer want to set up in the evening before they come in those open plots. And if we put our plots where they can take advantage of that, they're going to have a lot of success at beating us with their nose in those thermals. Another thing to consider is we look at this wonderful red oak ridge here. Okay, with the west wind, those deer are going to want to find that flat spot off this leeward side to bed. But what we also have to be very conscious of is during the rut, that with the west wind, if a buck cruises off this leeward side of this face, he's catching the wind coming over the top here from the west. It swirls, and he can smell everything back here. Now during the day, when those thermals are rising uphill from this side along the ground, these thermals are coming up from the bottom. The ground is warm, it carries that warm air up. He can smell that too. So by cruising that leeward side of that ridge, that buck can smell everything in this area. He doesn't have to go all over the place in flatland to get downwind of it, because he's got the wind coming over the top and swirling for him from this side, and he's got the thermals coming up from the bottom and bringing scent uphill on this side. So he can smell every doe on that ridge. Those does love that ridge for topography-based bedding. He knows how to cruise it to take advantage of that. You need to figure this into your plan for your bedding and your access and your rut stands, so we don't blow those does out of there, but we can hunt those bucks that are cruising that ridge. You got that same scenario down here on this ridge. Northwest wind, very prevalent. Those bucks are going to be on this leeward side here, pretty close to your access trail. As long as this access trail is not blowing these does out of here, he's going to cruise that leeward side of this ridge during the rut. Thermals tearing scent uphill, winds tearing it over the top. Make sure that when you're improving bedding, you take that in consideration, that you need those does someplace that you can get in there and hunt that spot during the rut. And again, those scenarios are going to repeat themselves all across the property. So we did rut ridge thermals. We talked about how prevailing winds dictate bedding. We talked about thermals in the plot that can get us. And make sure your stand selection too. If you select a stand right here, put a tree stand right here, when you walk in there in the morning, your thermals are rolling downhill, right? Just blowing downhill to any deer that are down here. When the sun hits the horizon and starts warming the land, those thermals are going to switch to uphill. So know that when you select those stands, that your wind is always going to switch right before dark, and your wind is always going to switch right after light. So know that, right? So knowing that, of course, the other factors that we take into consideration if we make a plan are the row crops, where you talk about to the northeast. All of your deer are going to feed there at night. You need to build your bed feed plans around that, because that works. Where and where not to enhance bedding. You cut down trees, you make a bedding area for these deer, they're going to use it for 20 years, okay? You use it for 20 years, so you have to be careful if you're going to enhance bedding and put those clear cuts in, that you put them in the right spot for bed to feed, and you're creating a line of travel for those bucks to use to cruise during the rut. And another thing that's kind of tricky, I'll just point it out real quick in this property, is you got east access and you got apple trees. So your deer are going to be in these apple trees at night, and we're trying to walk in here in the morning in the dark and out of here in the evening in the dark. That's going to create some serious problems for our access. There are ways to make plans around this, but you have to be careful. You can't walk through there in the dark, because those deer are going to be in there when those apple trees are dropping. It's going to create problems. So hope this helps you understand how the topography can affect your property. You already know how that timber age class can affect the property. Years 1 and 2 are going to be bedding, and then years 3 through 13 or years 1 and 2 are going to be feed. 3 through 13, we're going to have some significant bedding opportunities, so you need to make sure you put those in the right spot so that you can access the property for bed to feed to bed, and the rut. And if you can pull it all together, that is awesome. If you want some help, reach out to Sean, and we can help you put together a really detailed plan that'll benefit you and take advantage of what's going to go on here for the next 15 years.